Chief White, we appreciate you giving us this interview for our video version of From the Corner to the Courthouse, Both Sides of Justice. For informational purposes, we'd like for you to just give our listening base and our watching audience now a little understanding of your background as far as where you grew up at and also where you started your police career at.
Thanks for letting me share that. I was actually born in Richmond, Virginia. At the age of 6, we moved from Virginia to Washington, D.C., where I'd spent most of my childhood and adult life. I started on the department in D.C. as a police cadet at the age of 18. Retired after about 25 years as an assistant chief. After retiring, I was asked to create a police department in public housing in Washington, D.C. Public housing used to be part of the city, but due to a lawsuit, it was put in receivership and it became an independent agency. And many of the crimes that were occurred around the public housing site. So they actually formed their own police department, and I was tasked with doing that. Did that for 2 years, and then I was asked to come back to the city police department to help restructure that department. I did that for about another year or so, and from there I went to Greensboro, North Carolina as the chief for 4.5 years, and from Greensboro had the fortune of getting the job here as the chief and been here for the last 6 years.
Especially our young listening audience and again looking audience needs to understand that you didn't come from such humble backgrounds based on the environment that you were surrounded by and the challenges that you faced as a young person. You shared something on our radio version with us when you helped us kind of springboard this project back in February. You talked about a friend you lost to violence. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
You're right. I mean, I was raised by a single mother, me and three sisters. And when we moved to D.C., we lived in an apartment building for a good portion of our childhood. Very rough part of the neighborhood. My mother had to work a lot of hours to take care of us, and all of us actually worked at very early ages to help pay the rent. But many times my mother would not be home and my older sister would be in charge. I clearly recall one evening, my mother went to work and my buddy who lived in the apartment upstairs from me, I was about 13 and he was 16, I wanted to go to this party on the other end of town. And I wanted to go to the party with him. And I was waiting for my mother to go to work and I was kind of slide out the house and go. But my sister kept saying, "Oh no, I'm gonna tell Mom if you go." I didn't always listen to my sister, but for whatever reason, I listened to her that particular time. When I woke up in the morning, I clearly recall my mother waking me up and saying, "Michael was shot and killed last night." Michael was my buddy who lived in the apartment building above me, who went to the party that I wanted to go to. And I am sure if I was there, because we were tight, and that was my homie, as we say back then, that I would have stood up for him, and it's a great possibility that I would not be here talking to you, because I probably would have been a fatality also.
Wow. You raise a very interesting point, and I want to go outside the city of Louisville. I want to stay in Washington, D.C. for a minute. You've been around D.C. and you have been a part of D.C. in regards to more or less trying to shape a more safer environment for those who live in those environments and those habitats. Black on black homicides. Again, we want to stay away from Louisville. Just the magnitude of the numbers on black homicides that have came out of Washington, D.C. over the last 20 years is it is compelling at best. Could you share with especially a lot of the young individuals who will be viewing this interview, what are your personal thoughts about black on black homicides, not only as a professional law enforcement officer, but also as a father and just a person who was born in, for all intents and purposes, a black neighborhood, and what do you see as that ongoing, if you will, plague of not only just violence in all walks of life, but especially in the black community in regards to black on black homicides, and especially in the Washington, D.C. area? Just share your experience, if you will, about how those tremendous numbers, 300 homicides a year, 400 a year, 250 a year, what that did to that community, or what it did to those communities.
It obviously had a tremendous impact on the community, and I would tell you, it's a phenomenon that is countrywide, and we in Louisville are not exempt from that either. But specifically speaking of D.C., and I've had the opportunity to work in narcotics in D.C., to work in homicide. I've almost worked in every division, and I would tell you, 1 year when I was the narcotic commander, the mayor wanted to make it a point for us to lock up everybody that was dealing in drugs. And that was and we made more arrests per capita than any city in the country. And that was the same year that we had 482 murders.
Wow.
The most murders ever in the history of Washington, D.C. More murders per capita than any city in the nation that year. So my point being is that we're not going to arrest ourselves out of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we locked up everybody
Mm-hmm.
that was involved in drugs and everything else. We had 50,000 arrests in a matter of 6 or 7 months for narcotics. The answer to the problem is, it goes back to what all of us say, values. I mean, you cannot, and I get the opportunity, and I think it's important to do it whenever I get the opportunity to talk to young people, because I think what we all need to understand, if you don't respect yourself, you're not going to respect anyone else. So a lot of the violence that I was seeing as a police officer in D.C. and that I continue to see throughout my career, it goes down to lack of respect and love for ourselves. Because if I don't like Robert White, I'm certainly not going to have any passion for anybody that I have a beef with. I mean, I'm not going to like you more than I'm going to like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that just parlay into, instead of us resolving things through a verbal discussion, or the old days, how they used to do it with the little fist in the back alley, we're using guns and knives now. And unfortunately, most crime that occurs involving blacks, the victims are black and the suspects are black. That's just the reality. And what I think we have to continue to remind our community of, do not count on the government to save you. Do not count on the administration to save you. We have got to save ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have got to we got to care about ourselves. We got to hold each other accountable. Now, we got to hold government accountable, and you got to hold your police department accountable.
Mm-hmm.
But it starts right there at home, and it starts right there in those neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
So we have got to start looking after ourselves.